entering into an active imagination and creation with a whole bunch of people. And that's probably the most exciting part of it.
I think that theater is the most wonderful and awful profession you can imagine.
People think it's a glamorous business, but it isn't.
You're not feeling good one day, it's tough, but when you go out there, you have to forget about it and you just have to do your job. And that's being professional.
If you really want something badly enough, you're willing to put in those hours.
Part of the skill that you develop as a professional is making it new and making it work each time. The challenge of keeping something fresh. That's my job, and I like that.
You better love it, because it sure don't pay.
You have to really want it more than anything else.
I feel most myself and most confident of myself when I'm playing a role.
There's a transformation when I get in my costume. All of a sudden I start talking like this and calling people children.
You have to be really true to yourself and your own strengths and your own instincts.
There are no small parts, just small actors. So it's an attitude.
They say that the people who make it overnight are the people that stick around long enough.
I like the danger of a live performance. Theatre is always varies from night to night. It's different.
And it ain't television. It's better than television.
I look at the theater and I saw my name up on the board the other day and I was like, oh my God, that's really me.
Theater, like life, is about relationships and how we love those we love.
There has to be a real caring, I think, amongst everyone to make it work.
No one person is more important than another. You know, we're all a chain and we all work together.
Treating the people you work with consideration, not letting people down, and you know, making sure that you've done everything you can to get everything together.
This audition was, I would say, the most unusual for me. I had been having false labor. I was 9 months pregnant, and I'd been having false labor for 3 weeks.
So I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and when I got out of bed, now this sounds really corny, I said, Greg, this is your date with destiny.
And I phoned up and I said, could I come in on the Thursday? I know my audition isn't till the Saturday, but that's my due date.
But you never know in this business whether people like you or not. The business is 99% rejection.
There are so many variables in why you get a job or you don't. You know, you might be too tall or too blonde or too young or too old or have too high a voice, or you may look like someone that the director hated and he may not want to cast you for that reason.
I met Hal Prince, and he said, when is your baby due? He couldn't believe it. You know, of course, I'm as tall as I am round.
Hal Prince had us stop, and he turned to one side, looked at the people that were with him, then he turned at the other side, looked at the people, and then he said, boys, come down off the stage. I had sung for Hal Prince a year ago in the spring for the part of Raoul, and he told me I was too old. Then he did something which is unprecedented. He offered us the roles right there.
Actually, I'd been having contractions as I was waiting to go in to sing and to do the scene. I was having contractions.
And at that moment, I knew that, wow, they do like me.
And I get a call on the phone, and it's the casting people saying, we would like you to play the part of Christine.
And suddenly, a year later, after having been told that I was too old and not right for the role, suddenly I was perfect.
And I said, I'm sorry to have to cut this short, but I think I'm in true labor and I have to go to the hospital.
My agent asked the casting people about what, you know, made me perfect. Suddenly, a year later, the response was, that's show business.
Hello. Everyone in the theater lives for the excitement of the first night, when we get to perform our show for a real audience. And when you come to see the Phantom of the Opera, we would like you to have the greatest experience you've ever had, something that will stay with you for the rest of your life. The theater has that power to affect people. And when I say theater, I'm not just referring to the actors on stage. Many, many people have given their all to create the show you'll be seeing this afternoon. And just how an amazing piece of theater like Phantom gets made is a wonderful story. There are some enormous talents behind this show. Most likely you've heard of Andrew Lloyd Webber, the composer of Cats and Evita, whose original idea it was to make a musical of the Phantom of the Opera. Hal Prince is probably the most celebrated director on the contemporary Broadway stage. And then there's Maria Bjornsson, who first envisioned the fantastic sets and costumes for Phantom. But over 700 other people have contributed their talents and their skills. In the next few minutes, I will introduce you to some of them. Each one is just as important to the creation of the theatrical experience as is the actor. Oh, by the way, my name is Colin Wilkinson, and while you're watching this video, I will be here in this dressing room putting on my makeup and costume, because this afternoon you'll see me in my role as the Phantom of the Opera. When an actor comes to a new musical production, first he'll read the score, and together with a pianist, he'll sing his music over and over until it becomes a part of him. Then comes the day when he meets the director, the person whose job it is to bring this huge project to life. For the Phantom of the Opera, that man was Hal Prince.
And then you take his true history, which is an exceedingly personable, one half of his face exceedingly personable.
Rebecca Kane was to play the female lead, Christine. Rebecca and I had worked together before in Les Miserables in London.
And his mother instantly is so fearful of the deformity in his face that she claps a mask on him at the moment he can walk and makes him hide behind that mask for the whole of his life.
With a production as large and as detailed as The Phantom, one person could not possibly do it all. So Hal Prince has delegated his responsibilities to a team of directors, the music director, the choreographer, the stage manager, and most of all, to his longtime assistant, Ruth Mitchell.
I'm supposed to be close? Okay. Cold and feeling light, and then...
Ruth had worked on the productions in London, New York, and Tokyo. She knew Phantom inside out. Ruth and music director David Caddick guided Rebecca and myself through the early rehearsals as we worked out our movements on stage and learned the emotional nuances of the relationship between the Phantom and Christine.
And listen to the music of
It's an incredibly difficult character to play because you're on stage all night. You're looking upset and frightened 99% of the time, so there's not a lot of light and dark to play, so she can become very one-sided. The keynote of the performance is vulnerability, so you can't get out there and play it like this is your big Broadway starring chance.
Second obligato, the music, you come down, take her, sing for me.
This one, she does there. Then we go up a key, and the next one repeats twice, which is when... As the piece evolves, it shapes and sounds change depending on the style and weight of the singers. But it's going to sound sensational here. Now, these are the high C's now. This is the first one.
Come down on the second.
And he says, sing! Back up. My angel, sing for me! And you're at the organ.
While Rebecca and I were rehearsing in New York, back in Toronto, the craft shops had begun their work on the costumes, the sets, and the props. But what exactly do we mean by these terms? Imagine you were in your room at home. Take everything out of it. So you have bare walls, a bare floor, and bare windows. Now the clothes you're wearing as you stand in that empty room would be your costume. The room itself would be the set. And when you put all your stuff back in, all your records, the curtains, the bed, even your posters, these things are called props. Many of the props for Phantom came from a shop called Rabbit's Choice, named after a very special rabbit who belongs to props manager Fina MacDonald.
in a play like Phantom of the Opera, obviously we're not just dealing with beds and chairs and tables. We get to do more fantastical stuff, more interesting stuff. We get to make whips and elephants and music boxes with monkeys on them. He's the Phantom's companion. He lives in the Phantom's lair, and he plays a tune that we associate with the Phantom. And we molded his face out of plasticine, then made a plaster cast, and then poured rubber latex into the plaster cast and built up his face. He's sheepskin. All of his fur is sheepskin, with the exception of the little stand of hair at the top of his head and his side whiskers. Those are human hair. All of the trim on his jacket is antique trim, and it came from England with the costume designer. One of the really neat things about props that I enjoy is you get to take very ordinary stuff and transform it into very extraordinary stuff.
It's a bust of Schubert that goes on the piano which the Phantom plays. I've painted it with a bronzy gold color, and I'm going over it with a dark brown wash to give it a bit of age, to make it look like it's a bronze cast, basically.
Certainly everything that we've built has been incredibly detailed and decorated and very precise and elaborate, which is another challenge and has been a lot of fun to do.
So we want to disguise it in that pearl?
Well, it'd be great if we could. I acted professionally for, I guess, almost 10 years. Worked as a stage manager, worked in wardrobe for a while, and then fell into props. But I think the thing to do is to find a theater company and ask if you can volunteer your services. And if after a week or a month or a year of doing boring, mindless, repetitive junk, you're still interested, you've got a good chance of working in the business.
Most of us like to express ourselves by the clothes we wear, and today's fashion does have its extremes. But whether it's punk or designer clothes, what we wear today is nothing compared to what was worn in past centuries. The period costumes in the Phantom of the Opera are amongst the most beautiful ever created for the stage. And for associate costume designer Anne Ellsbury, creating the costumes for the Phantom was a wonderful opportunity.
Yes, absolutely. This is the most detailed show I have ever worked on. I mean, there's detail on detail on detail. There's an incredible, I mean, it's the biggest show for braid. There must be hundreds of miles of braid used on this show. There are approximately 220 costumes in the show. Most of these costumes, there's at least 200 hours on a costume.
This is from the Don Juan scene, and it belongs to Pantages, who is one of the leads in the Paris Opera Company. And it's made of a lot of contemporary fabrics, but there's a very beautiful Indian fabric in here with the beadwork. It's quite marvelous.
The very first thing you do is you look at the sketches with the designer and sort of figure out what fabrics you want to use. And then there's the shopping. We bought a lot of antique trimmings and stuff like that, and antique costume pieces which have since been chopped up and used in little pieces. Some of them have been used as is, but not a lot.
This is the half-man, half-woman hat, and it'll be worn in the masquerade scene. And the masquerade scene is full of wonderful and odd and crazy, spectacular costumes.
Barry! Is that Barry? Barry!
Oh, I like that. Something happens, especially when the costumes are as wonderful as this, designed so beautifully, and the fabrics are so rich, that as soon as you put on a slave master's costumes, for example, one of my own, and you have leather armbands all over and spikes around your head and this huge leather whip, and I mean, you can't but help but sort of start strutting in front of the mirror and practicing with it, and it's wonderful. Costumes definitely, especially when they're as fine as this, add a lot.
Many of the special effects that you see on stage, the fires, explosions, fog and smoke, involve pyrotechnics. Phantom relies on pyro tricks as much as a modern rock show does. To create these effects, we called on a master of incendiary magic, pyrotechnics expert Doug Adams.
Geez, we've done everything from Iron Maiden and Van Halen to Level 42, The Cult. It's endless. There's so many of the rock bands out there that like the pyro. It's very intricate because everything's run underneath the stage. And it's a lot of lines run, and it's a lot of changes that have to be done at the last minute. I like the aerial effects, the starburst, airburst, or waterfall effects, because a lot of times the audience doesn't expect things to go off above their heads in a theater or, you know, in a concert venue. Safety's the first thing. You know, safety has to come first. If there's an accident with pyro, it's not the same as having a miscue with a lighting call. Somebody can get hurt if they're at the wrong place at the wrong time. The pyrotechnician can't see the stage. There's an actor in front of it or on it, on the effect, and it's detonated. If it's not safe, it doesn't happen.
Because we want the look of the show to be as authentic as possible and true to its period, almost every actor in the Phantom wears a wig on stage, at least for part of the time. Some of the supporting actors may wear 5 or more wigs in their various roles. Whether that wig resembles his or her own hair or a beehived mountain of curls, wig making and maintenance are critical to the show. Laurie and Doreen Freeman are the wig master and mistress, and for them, working on the Phantom is a great experience.
It's like a wig maker's dream, isn't it, really? You know, you look at it and you think, oh, wow, we can do all these different periods, we can do all these different styles.
There are between 70 and 80 wigs. This is a raw wig. This is the way I receive the wig. And then it's cut and styled. First, you have to meet with the designer or the designer's assistant, go through the sketches, through the designs, and the wig is made, and then that's my job to, as I say, interpret the sketch.
Sometimes you come up with better ideas than what the designer has, too. You know, the designer sees it one way, but Doreen is extremely experienced with period hairstyling, so sometimes she does something and the designer will just say, ah, that's even, you know, that's better. We were reading one of the books, and you came across the fact that they comb their own hair over the front of them a lot to give a natural look, and yet people who had their own hair would powder it to look like a wig, so that they looked wealthier and could afford wigs. And the term big wig came from the fact that if you were very wealthy, you could afford a very big wig.
This is the half man, half woman for the masquerade.
Hi, Mark. Can you in here for something, huh? Ooh, that looks great. Man-woman today. It's the first time I've seen this. You can't just willy-nilly put a wig on someone and say, go out on the stage. If that person's uncomfortable, it can, you know, make them feel very poor on stage, and consequently their performance will suffer.
Unfortunately, a lot of actors have, they've had to wear some terrible wigs in their time. And their initial thing about wigs is, oh no, I don't have to wear a wig, do I? Until they get one on that's been made for them. Is this fast? And it's like, well, they're so thrilled. They can put it on and feel like that person.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
While the craft shops were busy making their props, wigs and costumes, the production activity moved from New York to Toronto's Tarragon Theatre. 6 weeks before opening night, the whole company came together and started to work on the blocking of the Phantom under the watchful and caring eye of stage manager Pat Thomas. The stage manager is the one person the director can count on to know about every detail of the production that will appear on the stage. She guides each rehearsal, and when we go into the theatre itself, Pat and her assistants will call the cues for the whole show.
Like athletes preparing for a race, actors have to warm up every day before they get down to work. An athlete might pull a muscle. For us, it could be a leg or a shoulder, or that most valuable muscle of all, the voice. Our directors have designed special exercises to get us into shape.
All right, come on then, let's get these bodies into gear. Count down, 1,
and up, and smooth, warm.
Assistant choreographer Ann Allen, besides being in charge of the dancers in the company, conducts a warm-up program for everyone.
The first thing is it brings everybody together as a company. So you don't start the day separate. You're all in, come together as a company, and you're all going towards the one aim. Secondly, they've got to get their bodies strong because there's an awful lot of movement required. It's 8 shows a week. It's a long time. So I kind of devised a warm-up which would slowly get them going and concentrating getting their centre strong, being able to breathe correctly so as they can move and sing. So we keep it light. Everybody has a little bit of fun, but we're all working. Nevertheless, we're all working and we're all gaining towards one aim.
This side, A1, A2, A3, A4, use the feet.
Just apply.
Music director and conductor Jeffrey Heward also has ideas about vocal warm-ups, which might seem quite unusual to you.
Good. Panting.
Until you find out that Jeffrey has coached some of the world's greatest opera singers.
Because it's hard in a rehearsal, you repeat and you repeat and you repeat. And we don't want their voices to be tired. And hopefully they'll learn a system so that when we do the show, they can warm themselves up and feel good about their voices every night. We want the barriers to be broken down so as actors they relate to each other. So in the process of putting them in the circle the way I do, you know, they watch each other and they begin to listen to each other. They stop thinking about my part, my acting, my voice, and they think about our show and our performance.
In these intensive rehearsals, we are working to give the Phantom a life of its own. Each actor's part must fit with the others to make the production work. Every word and every movement must be fine-tuned. Ruth, Anne, and Jeffrey work with one mind to create the perfect illusion.
Rehearsals are always hard. Trying to develop a character, find the character. You go through periods of self-doubt and saying, oh, I'm the only one in the cast that doesn't know what he's doing, and look what everybody else is doing. But then finally, you say, oh, that's what he is. You know, that's who the character is. That's you.
A lot of hard work. I mean, that's the hardest work of all. It's strange because that's also the most creative period. You get to try new things. Even if the show's been done before and the director's done it before, he may want to see what you can bring to it. And whether you're a singer or a dancer, if you've got a lot to do in the show, those days are just horrendous because it really wears you down. So rehearsal periods are very hard, but they're also very creative. So you have that sort of split focus, and it takes a lot of your energy, and all you can do is go home and sleep at the end of the day so you can be fresh for the next morning.
As opening night approaches, the pressure is on to perfect the performance. But if it weren't for the producers who raised the money to mount this production and who convince you, the public, to buy your tickets, we would not have an audience for whom to perform.
Phantom has become an incredible success because of the persistence of its producers. Garth Straczynski had the vision of bringing the Phantom to Toronto and the courage to mount the most ambitious production this city has ever seen. His plan started with the purchase of the Pantages Theatre. This was the perfect venue for Phantom, and owning it helped Cineplex Odeon to acquire the rights to the show. Then, as the costs of both restoring the theatre and mounting the production grew into millions, the question for Garth, as an astute business person, became, how far can we take this? How big could Phantom be?
And the answer was, in every area, yes, we were going to go with the #1 team, the best approach. We weren't going to compromise because we were going to prove that we could bring theater to an entirely new level of appreciation for this city and for this country.
The Toronto production of Phantom of the Opera has had the largest advance ticket sale to date for live theatre, not only in Canada, but anywhere in the world. Howard Lickman, Senior Vice President for Marketing at Cineplex Odeon, explains the promotional plan.
We dared to be different. It wasn't a question of reading the book on how to do it, but it was more a question of writing the book and being able to gamble and take the risks and to try things.
I mean, we began our marketing of this project about a year in advance. The object was to make Phantom of the Opera a recognized trademark way in advance and to build and build and build the anticipation of the event.
There was a closer analogy to marketing a movie, and Cineplex Odeon is, after all, a movie exhibition corporation. We used movie trailers in the theaters, and one didn't see scenes from Phantom, but rather it was almost a sampling or a beginning exposure to the haunting music. We toyed with, the image of the mask and the mystery and the night and the Phantom, and we allowed ourselves to have some fun. Corporate sponsorship was definitely an integral part to the success of Phantom of the Opera, and we had a broad spectrum of sponsors who were reaching more and more people. But the main message, 95% of the time, was capturing the magic, the power, and the mystery of Phantom. Whether it was American Express telling you to travel the world with the rotating mask, or it was the Pepsi shattering of the silence of the water with the rose. One of the unique innovations from a technological perspective, and they've actually just recently won an award for it, was the Pepsi Phantom billboard. The billboard was blank, white by day, and only at night, as it got darker, did the Phantom appear, and did the Phantom message appear, face the music. Phantom is coming. Roots was a different type of sponsor. They were a licensee of the merchandise rights. The whole concept of selling merchandise to plays is new. It only came about really, with the whole Cats and Phantom of the Opera and Les Mis phenomenon. We felt that Roots was reaching their own set of demographics, that they had an upscale quality image, and quality was important to us. We went with Roots, which meant quality. We ran the non-traditional direct mail, go to the front of the line campaign in the newspapers with American Express. We said, you can't even buy tickets unless you have an American Express card. We finally opened our box office at midnight. No more appropriate time for a Phantom to appear. And yes, the phones rang off the hooks, and yes, people were lined up at midnight.
For Garth Drabinsky, the phenomenal success of Phantom has been achieved through hard work and discipline, but also something more.
My experience has been to approach life with a passion, with a zeal, to take advantage of opportunities as they present themselves, and not to be hesitant, to understand that experiences in life are like a hole opening up in the line in football. And if you're a halfback and you decide to run through that window or that hole in that line quickly, you probably are going to be successful. But if you hesitate, then you'll lose that opportunity forever.
While the marketing team has been promoting the show and the actors have been in rehearsal, the designers and the technical crews have also been putting in long hours at the Pantages Theatre, preparing the sets, lighting and effects for a show which has been acclaimed as the most elaborate ever designed for the musical stage. Ian Poole is the production director.
I'm essentially responsible for all the production elements for Phantom of the Opera. This includes not only the sets and props, but also the costumes, the lighting, the sound, all the technical effects, the special effects. So the show runs night after night consistently at the high quality.
Mistakes in the planning stage can be costly later on. So, even before we have the real theatre to work in, there is another theatre. This perfect scale model of the Pantages stage, complete with miniature sets and props.
The model is actually a working tool for the piece. It's used, first of all, for the designers to give them the visual aspects and the dimensions and the proportions that they're looking for from theater to theater. Secondly, it's used for the shops to give them a dimensional view of